Welcome to the show. Julian Assange is free. That is how his platform WikiLeaks announced the end of a years-long standoff between the former hacker and the White House. Assange spent more than 10 years battling attempts to prosecute him for revealing classified U.S. documents. That publication made him a hero to some, but left him reviled by others. Whichever way people see Assange, it's cost him years of his freedom. Now, in a turn of events that surprised many, both sides have agreed to a plea deal that will allow Assange to walk free. He admits to violating the Espionage Act in return of a sentence of time already served in a British jail.
A 14-year fight for freedom is finally at an end after Julian Assange agreed to a US plea deal. He boarded a plane on Monday, bound for the US territory of the Northern Mariana Islands in the Pacific, that will go on to return the once fugitive to his native Australia. His brother said the family was overwhelmed.
I've been speaking to him this week and just going through all the details with him, and very anxious, very excited, and he's looking forward to spending time with his family and being free, being able to have the sunshine on his face, hear the birds, go for a swim in the ocean back in Australia. So he's very much looking forward to that.
For over a decade, the Australian hacker turned whistleblower has divided public opinion. Hailed as a champion of free press by many, condemned as a traitor by his detractors. It was in 2010 he became world famous after his company WikiLeaks published a trove of files and diplomatic cables. They included a video of an attack by an American Apache helicopter in Iraq that left 11 dead, including 2 journalists. For some, his actions were the hallmark of a free press, but for many others, the leaks were nothing short of treason. And Assange, an enemy of the state.
And down here,
a Swedish arrest warrant for rape and sexual assault saw Assange take refuge in London's Ecuadorian embassy. He would stay there for the next 7 years.
This is a victory that cannot be.
By the time Ecuador's president revoked Assange's asylum status, it was the United States where he was a wanted man. He fiercely fought his extradition to the US from inside a British prison. But the plea deal means Assange, while ever controversial, will at last be a free man.
And I'm pleased to welcome Jameel Jaffer. He's the executive director of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University in New York. Welcome to the day, Jameel. I want to ask you about the deal that Assange has agreed to in just a minute, but first your reaction to the fact that he's no longer in jail.
Well, I mean, it's the resolution of a very long saga. I'm sure that it's a great relief to him and his supporters. My guess is it's also a relief to the Biden administration. But I suppose we'll have to wait to see what happens in court before assuming that we've got all the facts right.
Mm-hmm. There have been mixed reactions to the fact that his deal would include an admission of guilt under the Espionage Act. What could that mean for press freedom?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit complicated. I mean, in some ways, it's a very good thing for press freedom that this case has been resolved in this way. What we were really worried about was a judicial ruling from the United States, from a U.S. court, that said the solicitation of government secrets and the publication of government secrets violates the Espionage Act and isn't protected by the First Amendment. If we had got that kind of ruling from a court in the United States in this case, it would have had really far-reaching implications for press freedom, because those kinds of things, soliciting government secrets and publishing government secrets, are things that journalists do all the time and need to do all the time if they're going to play the role that our democracies need them to play. So we have avoided that, possibility, which is a very good thing. But we do have this plea agreement now in which Assange is agreeing to, pleading to one count under the Espionage Act, admitting that he violated the law by doing, again, the things that journalists do all the time. So there'll be this document that says that Assange was sentenced to 5 years in prison, time served, but 5 years in prison for having done these things that that again are central to press freedom. So that's a real issue, and I think it means that the case will continue to have an effect on press freedom, not just in the United States but even abroad. It'll cast a kind of shadow, for the foreseeable future.
But Reporters Without Borders have called this a long overdue victory for journalism and press freedom. You don't agree with them then?
I think it's more complicated than that. I think it's a victory for Assange. It may be a victory for the Biden administration as well. It's a good thing that we avoided a judicial ruling in this case on the scope of the Espionage Act and the scope of the First Amendment, because nobody knows what that ruling might have said. But again, we do have Assange agreeing that he served 5 years in custody because he engaged in these acts. And these acts in this particular case are soliciting government secrets, publishing government secrets, the kinds of things that news organizations do every day and need to do every day. You can't hold government officials to account if you don't publish government secrets. You can't just tell the stories that government officials want you to tell if you're going to be a real journalist, as you know.
What do you think has led President Joe Biden to sign off on this?
Well, it's worth remembering that it wasn't the Biden administration that initiated this case. It was the Trump administration. The Trump administration filed the indictment after the Obama administration had concluded that the press freedom implications were just too significant and it couldn't justify charging Assange, given that a victory against Assange would mean a very significant curtailing of press freedom. But the Trump administration went ahead because it saw the curtailment of press freedom as a kind of feature rather than a bug. And then the Biden administration pursued Assange's extradition. But the Biden administration, I don't think, was ever very enthusiastic about this case. They didn't want this to be part of their legacy. They didn't want to create a precedent that could be used against, say, the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal tomorrow. And so my guess is that the Biden administration will be very happy to have this case behind it.
Yeah. Assange's critics took great issue with WikiLeaks releasing non-redacted military secrets, claiming the potential risk that could have posed to the people involved. How do you feel about that part of his work?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to defend everything that Julian Assange did or that WikiLeaks did. If I had been the editor of WikiLeaks at those particular times, I don't think I would have made the same publication decisions. But news organizations make news judgments all the time. WikiLeaks made news judgments. And, the real question, I think, is what would it mean if the government could prosecute an organization on the basis that it solicited government secrets and published the secrets? Because that's really the question that's presented by the indictment. There is this important debate to be had, I think, about whether those news judgments were the right ones, were defensible ones, were ethical ones. I think that's an important debate. But I think the legal question presented by the case is much narrower. The legal question is, can somebody be thrown in prison for asking government officials to share secrets and then for publishing those secrets? And I think the answer to that has to be no. If it's not no, it's a real problem for journalism.
Yeah, if it doesn't, what signal does this entire saga that now looks like it's drawing to a close, what does it send to whistleblowers or investigative journalists?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, I think the case is going to have a kind of legacy, because even though there's no judicial opinion endorsing the Justice Department's theories in this case, and again, it's a very good thing that there isn't one. But even though there is no judicial opinion, there is this plea deal in which both the Biden administration and Assange recognize that Assange served time in custody because he engaged in these acts. And I think that that is a precedent that some future American administration may cite to justify using the Espionage Act against a journalist. And it's a precedent that other governments may cite as well to justify using analogous laws against journalists or human rights activists or human rights researchers. So I don't think that we're going to be able to close the book on this case altogether. This case is going to have a legacy.
Jameel Jaffer of the Knight First Amendment Institute at Columbia University. Fascinating insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's go to Joel Dullroy in Sydney. Joel, bring us up to speed on the latest. What's going on right now?
Well, right now, Julian Assange is appearing before a court on the Northern Mariana Islands. Now, those islands lie between Australia and Japan. It is the closest US court to Australia, which was an important requirement made by Julian Assange in agreeing to this deal. He did not want to be delivered to the continental United States. And he appeared at court. Alongside him there is the former Australian Prime Minister, Kevin Rudd, who is now the ambassador to the United States. And that underlines the political significance of this case for Australia. Julian Assange has garnered quite a degree of sympathy from all sides of politics here. Many politicians have advocated for his release. The Australian Parliament passed a resolution calling for his release. Even those who don't support what he did at WikiLeaks think he's been sufficiently punished and that this case has just gone on for too long. So what's going to happen now in the next few minutes? He's expected to enter a plea deal, to plead guilty to a charge under the Espionage Act for receiving and publishing state secrets. His time spent in the UK prison system, which is almost 5 years, is expected to be counted as time served, and he could then be released and on his way back to Australia shortly thereafter.
Joel, what do we know about the state of Assange's health after so many years in prison?
There's long been concern about his physical and mental health. He was kept, according to WikiLeaks, in isolation for 23 hours a day in the Belmarsh prison there in the United Kingdom. And visitors who went to see him spoke often about his deteriorating mental health. His lawyers in previous court cases argued that he was at risk of suicide. So there's many concerns. He's going to have a long road of recovery ahead of him. His wife, Stella Assange, today said that he must be experiencing sensory overload to be surrounded by so many people in that courtroom and to be traveling so far after so long. So long road ahead, recovery ahead of him, but at least he will be back in Australia surrounded by his wife and his children, who he has actually never met outside of prison.
This has been a years-long saga with these cases against Assange. Is this now essentially coming to an end?
Well, this is an end to one part of the ordeal. This is a win for his freedom, at least, but it is not a win for journalism, because there are many groups, journalist groups, who are concerned that he has had to plead guilty to an espionage charge to secure his release, and they fear that that sets a dangerous precedent for journalism, because they say that essentially any journalist or whistleblower who releases state secrets could face a similar fate. His wife Stella says that he will be appealing for a presidential pardon, not only to clear his name, but also to make a statement that journalists need protection when they're doing their jobs in exposing state secrets. His supporters are also now trying to raise money. They need to raise $500,000 to pay for the private jet that flew him from the UK to the Mariana Islands. So it's been a long and expensive exercise, but for those who think he should never have been punished, and for those who think he's suffered enough, it is the end to what has been a 14-year-long legal ordeal.
All right, that's Joel Dullroy in Sydney. Thank you very much.